I'm Alexis Coe, and I'm the author of You Never Forget Your First, a biography of George Washington, and Alice and Frida Forever, a murder in Memphis. And today I am reading, I'm not reading a decision that Ruth Bader Ginsburg made when she was sitting on the court, but rather when she was arguing in front of it, because that speaks more directly to my personal experience with her. I studied Justice Ginsburg when I was curating the ACLU's centennial celebration. And she, of course, started a division or co-founded a division in which she argued for equal rights. And a part of her genius at that, while it was effective for a lot of reasons, and she had a lot of support, and she modeled herself and worked with Polly Murray. But the reason it was so effective is she didn't view gender discrimination as only affecting women. She viewed it as affecting men as well. And she knew that it would be more persuasive to argue in defense of men in front of the court, which was entirely white males at that time. And so this isn't, what I want to read is a case from 1970. And I love it. It's Stephen Wiesenfeld, who was a widower. I love this because fast forward, Ruth Bader Ginsburg would later marry him to his next wife. In the future. And it's a lovely story that doesn't start out so great, which is that Stephen was married, and he was married to a teacher who worked for 5 years prior to their marriage and continued teaching after they were married. Her salary was the principal source of the couple's income. And Social Security, of course, was regularly taken out of that. And so when she died and in childbirth, and Wiesenfeld was, in charge of their newborn and taking care of him, he, of course, applied for those benefits, which he very much needed at the time for himself and for his newborn son, and was told that his son could not receive those benefits. His son could receive those benefits, but he couldn't, because it was based on earnings of a deceased husband. That's what the law actually said. And the benefits for a deceased wife and mother are only available to children. So Wiesenfeld sued on behalf of himself and similarly situated widowers. And he claimed that the relevant section of the Social Security Act unfairly discriminated against on the basis of sex and sought a summary judgment. The 3-judge panel of the district granted him the summary judgment. But this is the big question, right, that faces Ruth Bader Ginsburg in the 1970s. How do I prove that gender-based discrimination violates due process of basically every amendment? And when I say that they were all male judges, I really want to make this clear that, we have Rehnquist, we have Powell, Blackmun, Marshall. Marshall, of course, was not, but White, literally White, Stewart, Brennan, Douglas, Berger. And it will be an 8-0 majority, which is just amazing. And it of course, was a huge deal at the time. And as I read this, I know it's not going to be as exciting as what she read when she was on the bench and her decisions. And, she was wearing a very plain suit because she was arguing in front of men who were not very pleased to see her in front of them. And she is trying to be as respectful as possible. And when someone asked her a question, she would say, I tried to think of an answer like I was explaining this to kindergartners. And so that's what I want you to keep in mind when I read this and you're like, wait, but where's Notorious RBG? This is Notorious RBG in the making, who's taking her mother's advice, never in anger. Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court, Stephen Wiesenfeld's case concerns the entitlement of a female wage earner's family to social insurance, and of the same quality as that afforded a male wage earner. 4 prime facts of the Wiesenfeld's family life situation bears special emphasis. Paula, the deceased insured worker, was gainfully employed at all times during the 7 years immediately preceding her death. So she was earning and she was contributing to our country. Throughout this period, maximum contributions, it's very late in the day here, were deducted from her salary and paid to Social Security. And during her marriage, both partners were employed. Neither was attending school. In 1972, Paula died, giving birth to her son, Jason Paul. And imagine the photos. RBG has photos of the newborn. They're biking. They're living their lives. They're doing the best that they can, just a dad and a son. He is now the sole provider. He is solely responsible for taking care of Jason Paul. So for the 8 months immediately following his wife's death, all but the 7-month period thereafter, he didn't engage in any sort of employment. So they weren't making any money in addition to suffering this incredible loss. And he had a newborn, which, let me tell you, I had one last year and it's hard enough, with 2 people. So he devoted himself entirely to the care of Jason Paul. Now, she goes on to talk about a bunch of laws that I'm sure you don't want to hear. And then she gets to the point. This absolute exclusion based on gender per se operates to the disadvantages of female workers, their surviving spouses, and their children. And so she really, the way she situates that is so smart. Because you remember, she's trying to get in this idea that women deserve equal rights, and the court very much feels like they're granting them, bestowing them. So it denies the surviving spouse of the female worker the opportunity to care personally for his child. So she's suggesting that, the child will fall into hardship, that this is discrimination and it violates the constitutional rights of Paula, the deceased, Stephen and Jason Paul, the child, to the equal protection of laws guaranteed to them with respect to federal legislation by the Fifth Amendment. She talks about the cases, she cites different things, and then she gets to the point that in practical effect, laws of this quality help to keep women not on the pedestal, but in a cage. They reinforced, not remedy, women's inferior position in the labor force. And I'll stop there. Obviously, she gets to more of the concrete arguments, and there's a lot of interrupting her constantly. If you look at the transcript, she maybe gets 2 words in. He was, she starts, and then, Potter Stewart interrupts all the time. And they're really looking for every angle, and they cannot find one. It's simply not right. And these early cases are what really define her for me, and what made her, in retrospect to me as I was studying it, just the likeliest of choices. And it's lovely to live in a world where that is true. And that is the thing that I think we all miss the most about her, and why it's such a wonderful opportunity to honor her.